My daughter took my ex-wife and her stepdad to meet her fiance's family without me. Then his mother asked for the truth. The next morning, all of them came storming into my house, demanding answers. And when her fiance saw me, he said one sentence that left everyone in the room frozen. My name is Jace. I'm 50 years old, and I've been a union electrician for 28 years. IBEW, Local 364, out of Rockford, Illinois. My house is a modest ranch off Alpine Road, the kind of place a working man buys because it is solid, practical, and paid for by long hours, sore knees, and hands that always smell faintly of copper and insulation tape. I bought it after the divorce 12 years ago, when my ex-wife Vivian decided her yoga instructor understood her soul better than I ever did. That yoga instructor was Wesley, a trust fund kid who had never worked a real job in his life, but who carried himself like the world should thank him for breathing its air. Vivian married him about 18 months after our divorce was finalized. Our daughter, Brooke, was 14 at the time, old enough to understand what had happened, but young enough to let her head get twisted around by a man who bought affection with credit cards, expensive dinners, and promises that sounded grand because they never had to survive contact with real life. It was the Monday before Thanksgiving when my life started rewiring itself. Rockford was doing that late November thing where the sky hangs low enough to feel personal, like a wet blanket sitting on your shoulders. I had just finished a job on East State Street, rewiring an old storefront that smelled like mildew, dust, and the ghost of whatever failed business had died there before. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands still smelled like copper, old wood, and electrical tape. I walked through my front door, dropped my tool bag in the entryway, and listened to the house settle around me. It was quiet, just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the ticking clock in the kitchen. I made coffee the old-fashioned way, stood there while it brewed, then sat at my kitchen table and started scrolling through my phone. That was when I saw the text from Brooke. She wanted to stop by Wednesday with her fiancé Connor after they got back from somewhere. I typed back and asked where they had gone. Her answer took longer than it should have. Madison. Meeting Connor's family. I stared at the screen for a second. Madison was not across the country. It was only an hour and a half away, maybe two with traffic, but it was far enough that people made plans. You packed a bag, coordinated schedules, picked a restaurant, figured out who was riding with whom. So I asked the obvious question, was I coming along? Because that is what you do when your daughter gets engaged. You show up. You shake hands with her fiancé's parents. You smile through the awkwardness. You prove that whatever happened between the adults, the child still has a father. Her reply came back too fast this time. Just Mom and Wesley are coming. Something cold moved through my chest. It was not anger yet. Anger has heat. This was colder than that. I asked why. Connor's family is traditional. It's just easier this way. Easier? I typed back. What do you mean? A few seconds passed. Then her answer came through. I mean, I don't want to be embarrassed. Can you not make it a big deal, please? Embarrassed. Right. I sat there looking at that word until the letters stopped looking like letters. I typed out 3 different responses and deleted all of them. One was angry. One was hurt. One was the kind of long explanation a father writes when he still thinks the right words might make his daughter remember who he is. In the end, I sent only 2 words. Got it. Then I sat at that kitchen table with coffee cooling in front of me and tried to figure out when I had become the inconvenient parent, the one to hide from polite company, the one whose existence had to be simplified, minimized, or edited out of the story, the one who was good enough to pay, good enough to help, good enough to show up in the cold when a car broke down, but not good enough to sit at a table with people who mattered. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my brother Ricky. Ricky worked at a body shop on the south side, and he had a sixth sense for when something was wrong with me. His text was simple. Yo. What's up, brother? You good? I told him I would call him later. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about every year I had shown up. Every child support payment made on time. Every birthday. Every holiday pickup and drop-off. The car I co-signed when Brooke was 19 and needed reliable transportation. The semester abroad I helped fund when Vivian suddenly claimed she could not cover it. The emergency appendectomy when Brooke was 16. When I sat in a hospital waiting room for 6 hours while Vivian and Wesley were conveniently unreachable at some spa retreat. 26 years of being her father. And I was not even worth a seat at the table. The real betrayal arrived on Facebook the next morning at 7:15, right around the time I was pouring my first cup of coffee and wondering if it was too early in the day to feel this old. I was scrolling through notifications when I saw it. The photo had been posted late the night before. Brooke was standing outside some upscale restaurant in Madison, wearing a dress coat, her hair done up, smiling like she had won the lottery. Vivian was beside her, looking smug in that quiet way she always did when she thought she had successfully rewritten reality. Wesley stood on Brooke's other side, one arm around my daughter's shoulder, grinning like an arrogant fool. Behind them were string lights and exposed brick, the kind of place where a steak costs $40 and everybody pretends that makes it better. Then I read the caption. Family dinner with my parents before the big meeting tomorrow. So grateful for my amazing dad and the love he's shown me. Dad. She called Wesley her dad. After 26 years. After 2.5 decades of being the man whose blood ran through her veins, the man who had worked overtime and side jobs, and weekend calls to make sure she never went without, I sat alone in my kitchen, looking at that post like a ghost who had not realized he was dead yet. My phone rang. Ricky. You see it? He asked. No greeting. No warm-up. I said, yeah. That's messed up, Jace. That is genuinely messed up. I did not disagree. Ricky went quiet for a moment, and then he said something that stayed with me. You know what the worst part is? She posted that knowing you'd see it. That wasn't a mistake. He was right. Brooke was not stupid. She had inherited her mother's talent for cruelty, wrapped in plausible deniability. She could always say she had not meant it that way. She could say, I was being sensitive. She could say I was reading too much into it. I told Ricky I would call him back. Then I hung up. I sent Brooke one message. Since Wesley is your dad now, let him act like it. You're cut off. Then I turned off my phone and went to bed. The next morning, I heard cars in my driveway. Not one car. Cars. I looked out the window and saw Brooke's luxury SUV parked behind Vivian's Mercedes. The whole crew had arrived. Brooke, Vivian, and Wesley himself, standing there in a cashmere coat, looking as pleased with himself as ever. Nothing says family emergency like showing up in 2 luxury vehicles to confront your father about his feelings. They did not knock. Brooke still had a key from when she used to stay with me on weekends, and she used it like she owned the place. She walked straight in, with Vivian and Wesley trailing behind her. Vivian scanned my kitchen with that familiar expression, silently cataloging everything that was not up to her standards. Wesley positioned himself near the door, like he was there to supervise instead of participate. Vivian spoke first. She always did. Jace, we need to talk. I stayed seated at my kitchen table, coffee in hand, my phone lying face up with Facebook still open. Do we? Brooke stepped forward. You saw the post, before you make this into some huge thing. Some huge thing? I repeated. You called Wesley your dad, publicly, to the entire internet. Wesley stepped up with that polished smile of his. Jace, I understand you're feeling hurt. I held up one hand. Let me stop you right there. You do not get to talk about this situation. Apparently, you are the preferred parent in my daughter's life. So congratulations. Start acting like it. His smile faltered. Vivian's eyes sharpened. Brooke crossed her arms. This is exactly what I mean. This attitude. This is why I didn't want you there. What attitude? I asked. The one where I exist? The one where I have opinions? The one where I am not just a walking checkbook you tap whenever you need something? Vivian's voice went ice cold. Nobody said that. You didn't have to. Actions speak, Vivian. You took your husband and my daughter to meet her fiancé's family, and you introduced Wesley as her father. So what did you tell them about me? That I'm a roommate? Some guy who funds Brooke's lifestyle and occasionally appears at holidays? Silence. I looked at Brooke. What exactly did you tell Connor's parents about me? She did not answer. Brooke. Her jaw tightened. The Hartleys don't do divorce mess, okay? They're traditional. Old money. Mom told them you were basically out of the picture. It was easier. There it was. Easier? I said quietly. So you erased 26 years of me being your father because it was easier? It's not erasure, she snapped. It's just presentation. It's a lie, Brooke. A lie you told your future in-laws about who raised you. She rolled her eyes. Biologically, sure. But fatherhood is more than DNA. Then she looked me straight in the eyes. You never acted like a real father, Jace. The words hit like a sledgehammer to the chest. For a long moment, I did not move. Then I whispered, okay. I got it. Brooke blinked, almost surprised that I did not explode. Vivian glanced at Wesley. The room went still. Wesley cleared his throat. The Hartley family has certain expectations. Don't care. He stopped mid-sentence. Vivian stepped in. You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. No, I said, standing slowly. I'm done. We came here to make peace, Vivian said through clenched teeth. You came here because Brooke wants something. Brooke's voice turned sharp. What does that even mean? I looked at my daughter and tried to see the little girl who used to run to me when I came home from work. I tried to see the teenager who cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke up with her. I tried to see the young woman who once called me in a panic when her car broke down on I-90, and I drove 2 hours through a snowstorm to get to her. But all I saw was a stranger in expensive clothes who had learned to treat people like disposable objects. Someone taught to believe that image mattered more than loyalty. It means the gravy train just hit the end of the line, I said. Brooke's face went pale. What are you talking about? The account I set up for you. The one I've been putting money into since you were 3 years old. The one I told you was for emergencies and maybe your wedding someday. I let the words settle. I closed it first thing this morning, before you even got here. Her mouth fell open. You did what? Vivian's eyes widened. Have you lost your mind? You can't do that. Already did. That money was for Brooke. It was my money, saved for my daughter. And apparently, I'm not her father, so she can forget about it. Brooke finally found her voice. How much was in there? I told her. The number hung in the air. Wesley let out a low whistle. That's substantial. 23 years of contributions, I said. Compound interest. Brooke's face went from pale to red. You can't just take that. It's mine. Watch me. I need that money for the wedding. Then ask your dad. I let that land. Your real dad, apparently. Wesley. I'm sure he can cover it. Wesley's face tightened. Vivian looked like she wanted to slap me. Brooke was shaking now. You're going to regret this. I shrugged. Maybe, but at least I'll regret it with my savings account intact and my self-respect still in one piece. She stormed back toward her car. Vivian followed, already on her phone. Wesley lingered for a moment. He looked at me with something that might have been respect or might have been pure hatred. Hard to tell. You know this isn't over, he said. I smiled at him. It is. He walked away without another word. I went back to my garage and finished organizing my tools. Ricky called that night, and I told him what happened. He laughed so hard he had to stop and breathe. About time, he said when he recovered. I've been waiting years for you to do that. I told him it felt good. It should. They've been walking all over you since the divorce. Jace, you're not a mean guy, but you have got to stop being such an easy target. He was right. I had spent so many years trying to be the bigger person that I had let myself become a doormat. No more. The next day, Ricky showed up at my place with drinks and a look on his face like he had just gotten front row seats to a boxing match. So, word is spreading, he said, dropping onto my couch. Vivian has been calling everyone, trying to figure out if there's any legal way to get that money back. I raised an eyebrow. There isn't. I know that. But watching her scramble has entertainment value all by itself. He cracked open a drink and handed me one. Word is she's already burned through 3 lawyers trying to find a loophole. There isn't one. That sounded exactly like Vivian. She always thought rules were suggestions meant for other people. Ricky leaned back. Here's the thing. You've got leverage now. The Hartleys are old money. They don't like being lied to. If they find out the truth about how you were painted, I'm not trying to blow up Brooke's wedding. Brother, Ricky said. She already did that herself. You're just deciding whether to hand her a fire extinguisher or let it burn. 2 weeks later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something told me to pick up. A woman's voice came through, polite and careful. She introduced herself as Judith Hartley, Connor's mother. She said she had heard some things, conflicting things, and she wanted the full picture before her family made any decisions about the wedding. I asked her what she had been told. There was a pause. Then she said they had been told I had been largely absent during Brooke's childhood, that Wesley had been the stable presence, that the divorce had been due to my issues. I sat down on my couch. Mrs. Hartley, I said, I've worked as an electrician for 28 years to provide for my daughter. Same job, same union. I never missed a child support payment. I was at every custody exchange, every holiday I was legally entitled to, and every school event I could get to. I have receipts for the car I co-signed, the tuition I helped pay, and the medical bills I covered. Would you like copies? There was silence on the other end. That is not what we were told, she finally said. I'm sure it wasn't. Another pause. Mr. Hollis, would you be willing to meet with us? My husband and I would like to hear your side in person. I thought about it for a few seconds. When and where? We agreed to meet. The Sunday before that meeting, Ricky came to my house with a legal pad. All right, he said, settling into the chair across from me. Let's go through this. What do you actually have? I had spent the week gathering paperwork, not for revenge. At least, not mainly for revenge, more for clarity. We spread everything across the kitchen table. Child support records going back to the divorce. Bank statements showing the education fund I had contributed to. Medical receipts. The co-signing documents from Brooke's first car. Report cards with my signature alongside Vivian's. Photos from birthdays, holidays, and school events. Ricky flipped through a stack of photos. You were at her high school graduation? Third row. Got there early to get a good seat. He held up a picture of Brooke in her cap and gown, standing next to me, both of us smiling. This was 2 years after Vivian remarried. You were still going to everything? I never stopped. He set the photo down and shook his head. And they told the Hartleys you were absent? Man, I am so freaking angry right now. It's all right. I've got the receipts. Ricky made a sound of disgust. Vivian was always good at rewriting history. Remember when she told everyone the divorce happened because you worked too much? Conveniently left out the part where she was sleeping with Wesley. I did not want to reopen old wounds. That's not what this is about. Maybe it should be. These people lied about you, Jace. They're still lying, and they're using those lies to cut you out of your own daughter's wedding. I looked at the piles of paper on my table. 26 years of evidence that I had been there, that I had tried, that I had never stopped being a father, even when walking away might have been easier. The Hartleys seemed reasonable, I said. Judith sounded genuinely confused on the phone, like what she had been told didn't match what she was starting to see. What do you mean? She said Connor had mentioned me a few times. Said I seemed like a normal guy when we briefly met at some engagement event. But Brooke and Vivian's version painted me as some deadbeat who barely existed. The math didn't add up for her. Ricky nodded. So she's doing her own fact-checking. Looks like it. Smart woman. He pulled the legal pad toward him. Okay. What do you want out of this meeting? I thought about that. I did not want to blow up Brooke's wedding. What I wanted was simpler. I want them to know the truth. What they do with it is up to them. Ricky wrote that down. Fair enough. But you should be ready for blowback. When Brooke finds out you talked to the Hartleys directly, she is going to lose it. Let her. He looked at me for a moment. You sure? This is your daughter. She stopped being my daughter when she called another man dad. I'm just the guy who donated genetic material at this point. Ricky went quiet. Then he put down the pen. I've known you my whole life. You're not a vindictive person. I'm not being vindictive. I'm being honest. There is a difference. Ricky cracked open a drink. All right? Let's prep your talking points. We spent the next 2 hours going through everything. By the time he left, I had a simple folder with the most relevant documents and a clear idea of what I wanted to say. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday evening. The Hartleys had suggested a neutral location, a conference room at their church. Ricky offered to come as backup. I told him no. This was something I needed to do alone. Monday night, Brooke called me. It was the first time she had contacted me since the confrontation in my kitchen. Her voice was tight. I hear you've been talking to Connor's mother. I did not ask how she knew. It did not matter. She reached out. She asked questions. I answered. What did you tell her? The truth. Silence. Then she said, you had no right. I had every right. You told them lies about me, Brooke. I corrected the record. This is going to ruin everything. No. The lies were going to ruin everything eventually. Her voice went cold. You're going to regret this. You keep saying that. Hasn't come true yet. She hung up without saying goodbye. I slept fine that night. Better than I had in weeks, actually. When Tuesday evening arrived, I got to the church 15 minutes early. The conference room smelled like lemon cleaner and old hymnals. Folding chairs had been arranged around a long table. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A coffee urn sat in the corner, probably making the same mediocre coffee it had been making since the Carter administration. I set my folder on the table and took a seat near the middle. Not at the head. This was not my show. Just somewhere I could be seen and heard clearly. The Hartleys arrived next. Judith was tall and silver-haired, with the kind of posture that suggested she had spent much of her life in boardrooms. Her husband Henry was shorter, stockier, with calloused hands that told me he had done real work at some point in his life. They shook my hand and sat across from me. Thank you for coming, Judith said. I know this is unconventional. I told her I appreciated the opportunity to set the record straight. Connor came in next, looking nervous. He nodded at me and sat beside his mother. The kid was not the enemy here. He had just been fed bad information. Then the rest of them arrived. Brooke walked in first, her face arranged into that careful blankness she had learned from her mother. Vivian followed, already projecting wounded dignity like a weapon. Wesley brought up the rear, his cashmere coat replaced by a more understated blazer, playing humble for the audience. The three of them sat on the opposite side of the table. Brooke positioned herself as far away from me as possible. Henry cleared his throat. We are here to clarify some things before moving forward with wedding plans. Judith spoke with Mr. Hollis last week. What she learned did not match what we had been told. We want to give everyone a chance to explain. Vivian opened her mouth, but Henry held up one hand. We'll start with Mr. Hollis. I looked around the table. Every eye was on me. The moment felt heavy, but not in a bad way. It felt like setting down a load I had carried for too long. I have been Brooke's father for 26 years, I said. I was married to Vivian for 14 of those years and divorced for 12. During the marriage, I worked. I provided. I was there for birthdays, holidays, and school events. After the divorce, I followed the custody agreement to the letter. I never missed a payment. I never missed a pickup. I never missed an opportunity to be part of my daughter's life. I opened my folder and laid the documents out one by one. This is my child support record, complete and uninterrupted for 12 years. I placed another document beside it. This is the loan paperwork from when I co-signed Brooke's first car. I wasn't unavailable. I was the one she called. I set down another paper. This is a hospital bill from when she was 16 and had emergency surgery. I sat in that waiting room for 6 hours. Then I added the graduation photo to the pile. This is from her high school graduation. Third row. I took the day off work. Finally, I pulled out the last document. And this is the statement from the savings account I set up for her when she was 3 years old. 23 years of contributions. I closed it 2 weeks ago because I was told I wasn't her real father. The room went silent. Judith studied the documents carefully. Henry's expression shifted from neutral to something much closer to anger. Connor stared at Brooke. "Is this true?" he asked. Brooke's jaw tightened. "He's exaggerating." I shook my head. "Which part? The child support records from the county? The bank statements with dates and amounts? The hospital receipt with my signature? The graduation photo?" Wesley leaned forward. "Financial contributions do not make someone a parent. Being present emotionally. I was present emotionally." I cut in. "I was present physically. I was present in every way a father can be present. You showed up when Brooke was 14 with a leased car and a trust fund. You bought her affection. I earned mine." His face darkened. Vivian's voice sharpened. "This is exactly why we didn't want you there. This inability to accept that Brooke has relationships with other people." I looked at her. "I accepted that she had a stepfather. I never tried to undermine your marriage or Wesley's relationship with Brooke. But you did not just build him up. You tore me down. You told these people I was absent. You told them I was not really involved. That is erasure." Judith spoke quietly. "We were told Jace was essentially a stranger, that he appeared occasionally, but was not part of Brooke's daily life." She looked at Vivian. Vivian looked down at the table. Connor stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I asked you," he said, staring at Brooke. "I specifically asked you about your biological father. You said he wasn't in the picture." Brooke's composure finally cracked. "He was barely in the picture. Every other weekend is not being a parent. Every other weekend was what the court gave me," I said. "I asked for more. Your mother's lawyer made sure I didn't get it." Vivian's face went red. "That's a lie. Check the court records." Connor was still standing. He looked at Brooke, then Vivian, then back at Brooke. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, the kind of calm that comes right before everything breaks. "So you lied about your father to make your family look better?" Everyone froze. Brooke's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Vivian's face went white. Wesley looked at the floor. The silence stretched until it hurt. Henry turned to his son. "Connor, we need to talk." Privately. Connor nodded. He looked at Brooke, and I saw something shift in his expression. Disappointment. The kind that comes when you realize the person you thought you knew is a stranger. He walked out with his parents. The door closed behind them. Then it was just us. Me, Brooke, Vivian, and Wesley. Brooke spoke first, her voice shaking. "Are you happy now? You ruined everything." I gathered my documents back into the folder. "If the truth ruins things, that is not my fault. You had no right." I had every right. Wesley stepped forward. "You need to think about what you're doing here, Jace. Family disputes can be resolved. But if you blow this up, it's already blown up. You three lit the fuse. I'm just not letting you blame me for the explosion." Vivian stood and grabbed her purse. "We'll see about that. This isn't over." I shrugged. "For me it is." They left. Brooke did not look back. I sat alone in that church conference room for another 10 minutes, listening to the fluorescent lights buzz and the coffee urn gurgle in the corner. Then I packed up my folder and went home. The next 3 weeks were chaos. Not my chaos. Theirs. I watched it unfold from a comfortable distance. Ricky kept me updated through his grapevine. The Hartleys had gone into full investigation mode after the church meeting. They verified everything I had told them. The child support records, the bank statements, the graduation photos. The wedding was not canceled. It was postponed indefinitely while Connor and Brooke worked through some things. That was the official statement. Unofficially, according to Ricky's grapevine, Connor was seriously reconsidering whether he wanted to marry someone who had lied to his family about something so fundamental. Vivian called me 5 times during the first week. I did not answer. She left voicemails that started angry and gradually shifted toward panic. Jace, we need to talk about this. For Brooke's sake, the wedding is at risk. Whatever issues we have, we can work through them. But you need to call the Hartleys and explain that you overreacted. Please. I ignored it. Wesley did not call. Smartest thing he had done in years. Brooke reached out exactly once through email. It was a long message that moved from blame to self-pity and circled back again. I was ungrateful for everything she had done for me. I did not understand how hard it had been growing up between two households. Wesley had been more present during her formative teenage years. She had never meant to hurt me. She had simply made choices that happened to have that effect. The closest she came to accountability was one line near the end. I understand now that some of my decisions were hurtful, and I regret the pain they caused. Not, I am sorry I lied about you. Not, I was wrong to erase you from my life. Not, I treated you like a source of money, and then called another man. Dad. I read the email twice, trying to find any real acknowledgement of what she had done, any recognition that she had lied about me, any hint of genuine remorse. There was nothing. I replied with 2 sentences. When you are ready to have an honest conversation about what happened, I am willing to listen. Until then, I do not have anything to say. She did not respond. Ricky came over on the 3rd Friday. We sat on my back porch even though it was cold enough that we could see our breath. Word is the Hartleys are pulling out of the wedding funding, he said. They were going to cover the venue and catering. Now they're not. I nodded. That's a lot of money. 50 grand or so, apparently. Judith told someone at their church that she couldn't in good conscience fund a marriage that started with deception. Exact words. I let that sink in. The Hartleys were not just stepping back. They were making a statement. Guess Wesley's trust fund is going to take a hit, I said. Ricky grinned. That's the thing. There is not as much in that trust fund as everyone thought. Vivian has been bleeding it dry for years. The house, the cars, the lifestyle. It's mostly smoke and mirrors at this point. I processed that. So Brooke's fancy wedding was being funded by the Hartleys, and now that money is gone. Yep. And the savings account I closed would have covered the gap. Without either one? Ricky shook his head. They're scrambling. I took a long sip of my drink. Life comes at you fast. Brother, you ain't kidding. The following week, Vivian's sister reached out to me. Aunt Paula. She was a reasonable woman, and I had always gotten along with her during the marriage. She asked if we could meet for coffee because she wanted to understand what had happened from my perspective. I agreed. Paula had never wronged me, and she sounded genuinely confused rather than accusatory. We met at a diner on the south side. She looked tired, like someone caught in the middle of an exhausting storm she had not created. I talked to Vivian, she said. I've also talked to the Hartleys. The stories don't match. I'm not surprised. She looked down at her coffee. I can't believe Vivian actually claimed you were absent. You did everything a father could do for his daughter. She paused. Jace, I've known my sister my whole life. She has a talent for making herself the victim in every story. But this, I didn't realize how far it had gone. I did not gloat. I just gave her the facts. Paula listened. When I finished, she sat quietly for a long moment. What happens now? She asked. That's up to them. I said what I had to say. The truth is out there. If they want to rebuild something with me, they know where to find me. And if they don't, I shrugged, then I keep living my life. I've spent too many years waiting for people to appreciate me. I'm done waiting. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have seen it sooner. I told her it was not her fault, and I meant it. 3 months later, I was in my garage replacing the starter on my truck when a car pulled into my driveway. I did not recognize the vehicle, but I recognized the man who got out. Connor looked different from the last time I had seen him. Less polished, more worn. I wiped my hands on a rag and met him at the edge of the garage. Mr. Hollis, he said. Got a few minutes? Yeah, sure. We sat on the tailgate of my truck, neither of us rushing to fill the silence. The early March cold still had some bite, but the sun was out, and the wind was not too bad. Connor spoke first. The wedding is off. I paused, then nodded. I heard rumors. Yeah, word gets around. He stared at the ground. I kept trying to make it work. I kept telling myself, everybody has complicated family stuff, right? Nobody's perfect. That's fair. But it wasn't just complicated. She lied. And when I started looking into it, really looking, it got worse. I waited. The stuff about you was just the beginning. The semester abroad she said her mom paid for? That was you. The car her dad supposedly bought her? You co-signed the loan. The medical emergency where Wesley supposedly saved the day? He wasn't even in the country. You were the one who was there. Sounds like you did your homework. I had to. Because every time I tried to talk to Brooke about it, she deflected, changed the subject, and made me feel like I was the problem for asking questions. I knew that move. I had been on the receiving end of it for years. Connor shook his head. The thing that really got me was how easy it was for her. The lying. It wasn't even reluctant. She just rewrote reality like it was nothing and expected me to go along with it. That skill runs in the family. He almost smiled. My mother said something similar. We sat in silence for another minute. What are you going to do now? I asked. Focus on work. Figure out who I am without her. It's been 8 months of my life built around wedding planning and family merging. Feels weird to just stop. I understood that. The disorientation of suddenly having space where obligation used to be. Connor nodded slowly. You know what? My parents like you. My mom said you remind her of my grandfather. Straightforward. What you see is what you get. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. He stood and brushed off his pants. We shook hands. Thanks for taking the time, he said. No problem. Good luck, son. He drove away, and I went back to replacing the starter on my truck. The update on Brooke came through Ricky a few weeks later. Without the Hartley money and without the savings account I had closed, the wedding would have been impossible anyway. But that was not the only fallout. Vivian and Wesley's finances, already strained, took another hit when some of Wesley's investments went sideways. Turned out Wesley had been playing fast and loose with what remained of his trust fund, chasing returns he could not afford to lose. The lifestyle they had been projecting was crumbling. There was talk of selling the big house and downsizing to something smaller. Brooke had moved back in with them, apparently. The fancy apartment she had been renting, funded by what I now suspected was money Vivian had been siphoning from Wesley, was no longer sustainable. At 26 years old, Brooke was back in her childhood bedroom, watching her carefully constructed image collapse around her. The irony was not lost on me. For years, they had looked down on my modest house, my practical truck, my simple life. Now they were learning that the foundation they had built on was not as solid as they thought. Turns out character is a better investment than cashmere coats. Aunt Paula called me in April to say Vivian had been asking about me. Specifically, whether I would be willing to talk. I told Paula I had said everything I needed to say. The ball was in their court. But I was not going to pretend nothing had happened just so they could feel better about themselves. She's not going to apologize, Paula warned. You know that. I knew. Vivian had never apologized for anything in her life, and Brooke had learned that skill from the master. Then we don't have anything to discuss, I said. Paula accepted that. She had probably expected it. Summer came. I took a fishing trip with Ricky up to Wisconsin and spent a week not thinking about any of it, just casting lines into a lake, drinking coffee too early in the morning, and enjoying the quiet. When I got back, there was a letter in my mailbox. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Brooks. I stood in my kitchen for a while holding that envelope. Part of me debated not opening it. The mature thing might have been to read it with an open heart, search for the apology, and start rebuilding the bridge. But I had spent 26 years being mature, being the bigger person, being patient, making room for other people's excuses. I opened it anyway. It was 3 pages long. Most of it was explanation without apology. She had been confused. She had been caught between 2 families. She had felt pressured. She had not known how to balance everything. She wrote about how difficult it was to grow up with divorced parents, how hard it was to navigate Vivian's expectations, how Wesley had been there during certain years, and how she had made decisions she now understood were painful. But she never wrote the words that mattered. She never said she was sorry for lying. She never said she was sorry for calling another man dad in public while treating me like an embarrassment in private. She never said she was sorry for erasing me to impress people with money. I put the letter in a drawer. Maybe I would respond someday. Maybe I would not. But I was not in a hurry. In October, I got a new apprentice at work. His name was Tyler. He was 22 years old, eager to learn the trade, the kind of kid who showed up early, stayed late, and did not complain when the work got hard. He reminded me of myself at that age. One day over lunch, he asked if I had any kids. I took a bite of my sandwich and considered the question. Finally, I said, I have a daughter, but we're not close. He nodded like that made sense and did not push for details. Smart kid. That night, I sat on my back porch as the sun went down. It was that clean autumn cold that reminds you winter is coming but has not arrived yet. The trees in my backyard were half bare, leaves scattered across the grass I would need to rake soon. I thought about Brooke. I thought about Vivian and Wesley. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to be enough for people who had already decided I was not. And then I realized something that felt like peace. I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be treated like a ghost. I had refused to be erased. Whatever happened next was out of my hands. Maybe Brooke would come around eventually. Maybe she would not. Either way, I was done carrying the weight of her choices. I had spent decades being a father. Showing up, staying, holding the line when walking away would have been easier. That was enough. It had always been enough. The fact that she could not see it was not my problem anymore.